Winter fatigue isn't really about the cold, and it isn't fixed by more sleep either. You can get a full 8 hours in December and still wake up feeling like you never actually rested. 5 specific Nordic morning habits, none of them involving a supplement, a gym session, or anything you have to buy. And one of them isn't even an action at all. It's 5 minutes of doing absolutely nothing. And it might be the most powerful thing on this entire list. Habit 5 is the one nobody expects because it's not water, not sunlight, not movement. It's silence, deliberately protected, and it's the piece that ties everything else together. Here's the perspective I want you holding on to for this whole video. Your body doesn't distinguish between a stressful notification and a genuine emergency first thing in the morning. Both register the same way, and starting your day that way, repeatedly, compounds specifically during winter, when your body is already working harder to feel alert, with less natural light available to help it. These 5 habits aren't about fighting winter. They're about giving your body a gentler entry into a season that's already asking more of it. If any of this is already reframing how you think about your own winter mornings, go ahead and hit like and subscribe if you're new here. This channel exists to hand you the real system behind Nordic living, and it genuinely helps to have you here for the rest of it. Let's start with habit 1, the one most winter mornings get backwards before anyone's even out of bed. Habit 1, a full glass of warm water before anything else, before your feet even properly touch the floor. I used to reach for my phone the instant I opened my eyes, scrolling through messages and headlines before I'd even sat up. And I genuinely didn't connect that habit to how heavy my mornings felt until years later. After 6 to 8 hours of sleep without a single sip of water, your body wakes up mildly dehydrated, cells running on reserves, and reaching immediately for a screen full of notifications sends an entirely different signal than the body actually needs in that moment. Every notification registers the same way to your nervous system, whether it's an emergency or an Instagram like. There's no built-in distinction. The shift. Before your phone, before coffee, a full glass of water, warm if you can manage it, taken slowly. It sounds almost too small to matter. I promise you it isn't. Habit 2, real daylight, even brief before you engage with a screen. This is genuinely harder in winter when daylight itself is scarce and the instinct is to stay wrapped up indoors until the last possible moment. I remember entire Copenhagen winters where I told myself there simply wasn't enough daylight worth stepping outside for. 5 minutes felt pointless against months of gray. What I didn't understand yet was that even brief daylight exposure, especially early, helps anchor your body's internal clock. The same clock governing energy, focus, and eventually your ability to wind down properly at night. Skip that anchor consistently through a dark winter, and your body genuinely struggles to distinguish morning from still technically night, which shows up as exactly the kind of heavy, foggy fatigue so many people just accept as a normal winter symptom. The shift. 5 to 10 minutes outside or at minimum right next to a window with real daylight coming through before your day gets swallowed by a screen. Habit 3. Delaying caffeine, even briefly, rather than reaching for it the second you're upright. I want to be honest. This was the habit I resisted longest and hardest because coffee had been the very first thing in my morning for as long as I could remember. non-negotiable, sacred almost. Here's what eventually got through to me. Your body is already naturally waking itself up in those first waking minutes. Hormones activating gradually, alertness building on its own timeline. Introducing caffeine immediately interrupts that natural process before it's actually finished, which often produces a sharper, shorter energy. Spike followed by a harder crash later in the day. The exact cycle so many people describe as, "I can't function without coffee," without ever questioning whether the coffee itself, or simply its timing, might be part of what's creating that dependency in the first place. The shift: water first, a few minutes of daylight, even a short walk if you can manage it, and let coffee arrive 45 minutes to an hour later than your instinct wants it to. I didn't believe this would make a noticeable difference until I actually tried it for a week, slightly annoyed the whole time, and grudgingly had to admit my energy felt steadier by the end of it. We've covered hydration, light, and the timing of your first stimulant, 3 habits that quietly work together to give your body a gentler entry into a day that winter is already making harder. What's left addresses movement. And then the piece that ties this entire list together in a way I genuinely didn't expect the first time I tried it. Habit 4, gentle movement instead of intense exercise, specifically in the morning. I want to be careful here because I'm not telling anyone exercise is wrong or that intense workouts don't have their place. They absolutely can later in the day, once your body's genuinely warmed up rather than freshly woken. What surprised me learning about this was realizing that a demanding workout immediately upon waking asks a lot of a body that's already managing quite a bit physiologically in those first waking minutes. And for some people, especially during winter, when the body's already working a little harder to feel alert, that immediate intensity can feel like one more demand rather than genuine energy. A slow walk, unhurried, no destination, phone left behind, does something different. It gives your body real movement and fresh air without asking it to perform. The shift: if mornings are for movement at all, let it be gentle, a walk, easy stretching, and save anything more demanding for later in the day. Once your body has had a real chance to wake up on its own terms first. And habit 5, the one I promised. And it's genuinely the piece that surprised me most, because it's not really an action at all. 5 minutes of protected, deliberate silence. No phone, no music, no conversation. Nothing except sitting with your own breathing. I'll be honest. The first time I actually tried this, sitting by a window with nothing to do on purpose, it felt almost uncomfortable, like I was wasting time I should be spending on something productive. It took me longer than I'd like to admit to realize that discomfort itself was information. I'd genuinely forgotten what it felt like to just sit unoccupied for even a few minutes without immediately reaching for something to fill the space. Danish and broader Nordic culture has a real respect for this kind of stillness. This idea that not every moment needs to be occupied or productive to actually matter. Practiced consistently, even just 5 minutes, it seems to change something about how the rest of the morning unfolds. Not dramatically, not in a way you could point to and prove, but noticeably the way a room feels different once you've actually paused in it rather than rushing straight through. Here's the full sequence in order: water before anything else. Real daylight before a screen. caffeine delayed by roughly an hour, gentle movement instead of intensity, if movement happens at all, and 5 minutes of genuine, protected silence somewhere in there, doing nothing except being present in it. None of this requires a purchase, a gym membership, or a personality transplant. It requires roughly 30 minutes most mornings, arranged in a slightly different order than most of us default to. And during winter specifically, when your body is already asking for a little more patience, that gentler entry into the day tends to matter more than it would the rest of the year. I don't want to promise you this fixes everything, because promises like that usually come from people selling something, and I'm not. What I can tell you honestly is that a week of trying this, even imperfectly, tends to feel noticeably different by the end of it. Not a transformation, just mornings that feel a little less like something you're fighting through, and a little more like something you're actually inside of. Tell me in the comments which of these 5 you're most likely to try tomorrow morning. I'd guess for a lot of you, it's the silence. I read every single comment. And if you know someone who's been dragging through this winter more than usual, send this to them. I know winter mornings come with real obstacles that make even 5 small habits harder than they sound, so let me address them honestly, one at a time. Habit 1, water before anything else, is hardest simply because reaching for the phone has become so automatic it barely registers as a choice anymore. It's closer to a reflex than a decision. If that's true for you, the fix isn't willpower in the moment you wake up, half-conscious and running on autopilot. It's removing the phone from arm's reach entirely the night before, charging it across the room instead of on the nightstand, so the automatic reach simply has nowhere immediate to land. A glass of water left beside your bed the night before, visible the second you open your eyes, gives your hand something else obvious to reach for first. Habit 2, daylight before screens, runs into the most obvious winter-specific obstacle. Some mornings, there genuinely isn't much daylight to find, especially if you're waking before sunrise for work. I want to be honest about this rather than pretend it away. On the darkest mornings, even standing by a window in the gray, pre-dawn light still provides more circadian signal than staying under artificial indoor lighting with curtains drawn. It's not the same as full daylight, and I won't claim otherwise, but it's meaningfully different from nothing. If your schedule genuinely has you waking in full darkness most winter mornings, prioritize getting outside as soon as actual daylight does arrive, even if that's an hour or 2 after you're already up, rather than skipping the habit entirely because the ideal version isn't available at your exact wake time. Habit 3, delaying caffeine, tends to fail specifically on the hardest, most exhausted mornings, precisely the mornings you're least willing to experiment with anything that might delay feeling more awake. I understand that resistance completely, because it was mine too, especially in the depths of a Copenhagen January, when getting out of bed at all felt like the whole achievement some days. What actually helped me stick with it wasn't forcing myself through the hardest mornings first. It was starting on a moderately tired day, not my worst one, so I had enough patience to actually notice the difference by the end of the week, rather than abandoning the experiment on day 1 out of sheer exhaustion and never giving it a fair test. Habit 4, gentle movement instead of intensity. meets resistance from a different direction. People who've built their identity around a demanding morning workout routine, for whom gentle can feel like giving up something they're genuinely proud of. I want to be clear. I'm not asking anyone to abandon a workout routine they love and that serves them well. The adjustment is narrower than that. If you're someone who already feels the winter fatigue this video is addressing, experimentally shifting intensity later in the day for a couple of weeks, replacing it specifically with a gentle morning walk, and honestly noticing whether your energy through the day changes. If it doesn't, or if your intense morning routine already feels genuinely energizing rather than depleting, this particular habit may simply not be the missing piece for you specifically. And that's a completely reasonable outcome too. Habit 5, the 5 minutes of silence, is by far the one people report as hardest to actually stick with, more than any other on this list. Not because it requires effort, but because it requires tolerating a kind of stillness most of us have genuinely lost practice with. If sitting in silence feels agitating rather than calming the first few times you try it, that's an extremely common reaction, not a sign you're doing it wrong. Restlessness during stillness is often the clearest evidence of exactly how unaccustomed to it your nervous system has become. Starting with 2 minutes instead of 5 and building up gradually over a couple of weeks tends to work far better than forcing the full 5 minutes immediately and quitting in frustration after day 2. I want to say something about the sequence as a whole because I think it matters more than any individual habit. This entire list assumes a genuinely difficult season, not a personal failing. Winter fatigue is real, physiologically real, tied to light exposure and circadian rhythm in ways that have nothing to do with discipline or character. If you've spent past winters quietly assuming your exhaustion meant something was wrong with you specifically, that everyone else seemed to manage fine while you struggled, I want to gently push back on that assumption. Reduced daylight genuinely affects the body, broadly, and the fact that it hits some people more noticeably than others doesn't mean the ones who struggle more are doing something wrong. I also want to acknowledge something about consistency across an entire season, not just a single week. These 5 habits work best as a loose, repeated pattern across the darkest months, not a perfect streak you either maintain flawlessly or fail at entirely. Some mornings, only 1 or 2 of these 5 will actually happen, and that's genuinely fine. A partial version of this sequence, repeated imperfectly across December, January, and February, does real work over the course of a season, even with plenty of missed or incomplete mornings mixed in. The goal was never a perfect week. It was a slightly gentler relationship with a genuinely hard season, built a little at a time, allowed to be imperfect without collapsing entirely the first time real life interrupts it.